Judicial secrecy,
Okay.
that we can't.
You said that the night before, Madeleine and Sean had been very upset, and
I didn't say that, actually.
What, that was in the statement, wasn't it? That was leaked out. Was that not the case? Was she not upset the night before and talked to you the night?
Agora é tempo para o
Gonçalo, good luck. Good luck, my friend. Are you pretty confident?
Forward a little bit, guys. Okay. Right, there we are. Thank you.
To your right here, please. Straight there, please. Kate and Gerry, GMTV.
The name Madeleine McCann still echoes like an open wound across Europe and beyond. She was only 3 years old when she vanished without a trace on the night of May 3rd, 2007, from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal. What should have been a simple family vacation turned into one of the most infamous disappearances of modern times. For years, her face has appeared on front pages, TV screens, and billboards, a haunting reminder of a mystery that refuses to fade. At the heart of this story lies a clash between two narratives. On one side, the official police process, which ultimately concluded there was insufficient evidence to charge anyone. On the other, a retired Portuguese investigator, Gonçalo Amaral, who shocked the world in 2008 with his book, The Truth of the Lie. Amaral argued that Madeleine had died inside the McCanns' apartment, and that her disappearance was carefully staged. His theory ignited outrage, not only from Kate and Gerry McCann, but from millions of people who saw his claims as cruel speculation. Yet, for others, his words echoed suspicions they had silently held all along. What makes this case so unsettling is not only the disappearance itself, but the fog of contradictions, missing evidence, and unanswered questions that surround it. Why did witness statements differ so dramatically? How could phone records appear altered, and why did court battles over Amaral's book become almost as famous as the case itself? More than a decade later, despite millions of pounds spent on investigations and countless theories debated worldwide, the truth remains elusive. This story is not just about one child, it is about perception, about trust, about the way truth can fracture when filtered through the lenses of media, politics, and personal pain. Tonight, we take a closer look at Amaral's controversial claims, the McCanns' fierce defense, and the troubling details that continue to haunt this mystery. The question remains as chilling today as it did in 2007. What really happened to Madeleine McCann? In the summer of 2008, a year after Madeleine McCann vanished, former Portuguese detective Gonçalo Amaral released a book that would ignite one of the most bitter legal battles in modern crime history. The book, titled The Truth of the Lie, did not tread lightly. Amaral claimed that Madeleine had died inside apartment 5A at the Ocean Club, and that her parents, Kate and Gerry McCann, staged an elaborate cover-up. He wrote with the authority of someone who had once led the investigation, giving his words a weight that no ordinary commentator could carry. For the McCanns, the book was more than a personal attack. It was, in their eyes, a direct blow to the ongoing search for their daughter. If the public came to believe Amaral's version of events, who would continue to look for a living child? And if people stopped searching, would that not condemn their daughter to be forgotten? Their anger was immediate, and their legal team was mobilized almost overnight. By 2014, the fight had escalated into a high-stakes courtroom showdown in Lisbon. Kate and Gerry McCann traveled from England to Portugal to testify, seeking more than £1 million in damages. The courtroom atmosphere was tense. On one side stood the grieving parents, determined to defend their honor and the hope that their daughter might still be alive. On the other stood Amaral, defiant, insisting he had told no lies, that his book was grounded in the police case files, and that freedom of expression entitled him to share his conclusions. The trial dragged on for months, watched closely by journalists from both Portugal and the United Kingdom. When the ruling finally came in April 2015, it was a dramatic victory for the McCanns. Amaral was ordered to pay €500,000 in damages, and his book was banned. Outside the courthouse, Kate McCann described the judgment as a moment of relief, saying that the book had inflicted significant and ongoing damage on the search for Madeleine. But that relief was short-lived. Amaral appealed, and in 2016, the higher court overturned the decision. In early 2017, the Portuguese Supreme Court went even further, rejecting the McCanns' final appeal. The justices made a striking clarification. Shelving the case in 2008 had not cleared the parents of suspicion. Lack of evidence, they said, was not proof of innocence. With those words, Amaral's right to express his theory was firmly protected under Portuguese law. The reversal devastated Kate and Gerry. Not only had they lost the damages, but they now faced the painful reality that a book branding them as deceivers would remain on shelves. For Amaral, it was a personal vindication, a validation of his claim that his conclusions lay firmly within the bounds of free speech and public debate. Beyond the courtroom, the public was split. Supporters of the McCanns viewed Amaral as a disgraced detective profiting from tragedy. Supporters of Amaral argued that he was silenced for telling uncomfortable truths. The legal war became an extension of the larger battle. The official narrative versus the alternative theory. Hope against suspicion. The living child against the possibility of a secret death. The scars of that legal war remain visible even today. It was not simply a dispute over money or reputation. It was a fight over narrative control, over who had the right to shape the story of Madeleine McCann. And in the end, the highest court in Portugal declared that Amaral's voice, however controversial, could not be muted. Just 2 weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Gerry McCann launched what became one of the most talked about initiatives in the case, the Find Madeleine Fund. Its purpose was clear: to gather financial resources that would allow the search to continue long after the initial media storm faded. But very quickly, the fund grew into something much larger than anyone expected. Donations poured in from all corners of the world. Ordinary families sent small contributions, moved by the McCanns' plight. But the fund also attracted attention from high-profile supporters, among them author J.K. Rowling and business magnate Sir Richard Branson, who donated significant sums. At its height, the fund was receiving an estimated £260 every hour, more than £6,000 a day, £43,000 a week, and upwards of £170,000 every month. By the end of its first year, nearly £2 million had been raised. With such staggering figures, the fund quickly became a financial powerhouse, but also a lightning rod for scrutiny. Supporters saw it as a lifeline, a way to ensure that Madeleine's face remained visible, her story alive, and the search ongoing. Critics, however, began to question how the money was truly being spent. Was every pound going toward private investigators and awareness campaigns, or was a portion being diverted into legal battles, like the one against Gonçalo Amaral? The McCanns maintained that the fund existed solely to support the search for their daughter. Yet the lack of transparency in certain expenses gave skeptics ammunition. In the eyes of some, the fund symbolized the strength of community compassion. In the eyes of others, it blurred the lines between hope and self-defense. By 2014, as the court case against Amaral intensified, questions around the fund became harder to ignore. Was this money helping to find Madeleine, or was it shielding her parents from accusations that refused to go away? The debate reflected the larger divide in the public opinion: faith in the McCanns' innocence on one side, suspicion and doubt on the other. To understand the controversy surrounding Madeleine's disappearance, one must revisit the night of May 3rd, 2007, when the McCanns and their friends gathered for dinner at the resort's tapas bar. This seemingly ordinary evening would later become the cornerstone of conflicting accounts, theories, and suspicions. According to police records, 6 staff members were on duty that night. 2 worked in the kitchen and saw nothing of the dining area, but the other 4 noticed movements that struck them as unusual. A barman recalled at least one member of the McCann group leaving the table during dinner. A waitress thought Gerry McCann was absent for about 30 minutes. Another waiter told police that a tall man left for around 15 minutes, and later, a second man disappeared for half an hour. When he returned, the table quickly broke up because a child had just been reported missing. The McCanns and their friends also admitted to multiple absences. Matthew Oldfield left at 8:55 p.m., Gerry at 9:05, Jane Tanner at 9:10, Oldfield and Russell O'Brien again at 9:30, and finally Kate McCann at 10 p.m. To outsiders, this checking schedule was presented as a rotation of responsible parents ensuring the children were safe. But critics argued that it seemed more like a rehearsed defense against public judgment. After all, who would forgive a group of parents for leaving young children alone while enjoying dinner and wine? Kate McCann later wrote that the tapas bar could seat only about 15 people in total, meaning their group alone nearly filled the restaurant. From the outside, this routine might have seemed acceptable. The apartments were close by, just a short walk away. Yet the reality was different. From their table, the McCanns could not see the doors to their apartment. A wall topped with bushes blocked the view. The only visible landmark was the pool. In truth, the children were completely out of sight. This fact has continued to fuel debate. If the children could not be seen, and if the checking schedule was inconsistent, how safe were they really? For some, it raised the chilling possibility that something could have happened in a narrow window of time when no parent was present. For others, it suggested that if an abduction did occur, it might have been easier than anyone first imagined. The evening also carried with it smaller but puzzling details. Staff mentioned an empty place setting at the table, as if someone had eaten and left. Witnesses outside the group described seeing people walking back and forth between the restaurant and the apartments. In later interviews, timelines conflicted and memories blurred. Even the McCanns' closest friends could not always agree on who left when or what they saw. And so, the Tapas 7, as the group came to be known, entered the case file not just as witnesses, but as pieces in a puzzle that still defies assembly. Were they merely distracted parents trying their best to balance family and leisure, or were their statements shaped to protect a truth too painful to admit? What remains clear is this: the tapas bar was not just the backdrop to a night of dinner and conversation. It was the stage on which the disappearance of Madeleine McCann unfolded, and from which questions have never stopped echoing. 2 nights before Madeleine McCann was reported missing, the Ocean Club Resort hosted one of its regular quiz nights. On May 1st, 2007, the tapas bar was buzzing with the laughter and chatter of holidaymakers. The quiz was run by a young aerobics instructor named Najwa Chekaya. At around 9 p.m., as the contest began, Gerry McCann approached her and invited her to join their table. She accepted and sat with the group for about 20 minutes, exchanging small talk. What stood out to her, however, was that one seat at the table appeared empty, as if someone had already eaten and left. Police later pressed Najwa on who might have been missing. She wasn't certain. She didn't recall seeing Kate McCann at the table during that time, though she admitted she couldn't be absolutely sure. That empty place setting became one of those nagging details investigators would never fully resolve. Later that same night, another oddity emerged. Between 10:16 and 10:27 p.m., Kate McCann's phone was used 6 times in just 11 minutes. To this day, no clear explanation has been provided about who she was calling, who was calling her, or what was being discussed. In interviews, the McCann spokesman, Clarence Mitchell, would later claim that the group didn't take phones or watches to dinner, an effort to portray them as parents caught completely off guard by what would soon happen. But if that was true, how could Kate's phone have been so active that evening? Around the same time, just minutes after Kate's phone activity ended, an unsettling testimony surfaced from upstairs neighbor Pamela Fenn. She lived directly above apartment 5A. In a statement made to police months later, Mrs. Fenn recalled hearing the cries of a young child around 10:30 that night. The crying, she said, lasted for over an hour, growing louder and more distressed, punctuated by the repeated call of, "Daddy, Daddy!" Just before midnight, she heard the patio door slide open, and suddenly the crying stopped. The McCanns flatly denied this account. Both Kate and Gerry insisted that nothing unusual had occurred that night, claiming they had checked on the children several times and that all had been fine. To dismiss the testimony of an elderly neighbor may have been easy, but for investigators, it introduced another layer of doubt. Was Madeleine crying alone for more than an hour? If so, who returned to the apartment at midnight to silence her? The following morning, according to Kate's later book, Madeleine made an offhand comment that has chilled many ever since. She asked her parents why they had not come when she and her brother cried the night before. Kate described the remark as strange, but quickly brushed it aside. Yet, in retrospect, it seemed to foreshadow the events that would soon unfold. If the tapas bar raised questions, the phone records only deepened the mystery. When detectives seized Kate and Gerry McCann's mobile phones on May 4th, the day after Madeleine disappeared, they hoped to uncover crucial information. Instead, what they found raised more suspicions. On Kate's phone, the call history showed no outgoing calls at all for an entire week, from April 27th to the early hours of May 4th. Gerry's phone looked even stranger. According to its records, no calls were made or received before May 4th. Yet police noted a contradiction. On the night of May 3rd, Gerry had called Kate at 11:17 p.m. That call appeared on Kate's handset, but was missing from Gerry's own log. For Gonçalo Amaral, this was no accident. In his book, he suggested someone had tampered with the call histories after Madeleine's disappearance. Experts later echoed the same concern. Deleting call logs is not common practice. Most people simply let their phone keep the record. If logs were erased, the question becomes why? What was there to hide? Portuguese police also obtained official records from Vodafone. These painted a very different picture from what the McCanns' handsets displayed. According to Vodafone, Gerry had made or received 9 calls on April 29th, May 2nd, and May 3rd. 2 of those calls came from Kate on April 29th, calls absent from her own phone. Even more troubling was the discovery that Gerry received 14 voicemail text alerts on May 2nd, the day before Madeleine vanished. That detail, flagged in a confidential report, leaked quickly to the British press. Headlines erupted with speculation about Gerry's mysterious text messages. But when pressed in an interview, Gerry dismissed the reports, insisting that no such flood of messages had ever occurred. He claimed the media had exaggerated and distorted the facts. Still, the inconsistencies didn't end there. Investigators discovered that on May 2nd, Jane Tanner, one of the so-called Tapas 7, exchanged text messages with a friend named Christine Flaxman. Flaxman wasn't just any friend. She was a DNA expert at the UK's Forensic Science Service, the very laboratory analyzing evidence from the McCanns' apartment and rental car. Why Tanner was in contact with her during that period became another unresolved question, especially since Flaxman's number was oddly stored in Tanner's phone under her husband's name. When prosecutors tried to gain access to the contents of the McCanns and their friends' text messages, a Portuguese judge refused, citing privacy rights. A second request, suggesting that a judge could filter the messages to remove irrelevant material, was also denied. For critics, this was a missed opportunity to clarify troubling gaps. For supporters, it was a necessary protection against intrusion. In the end, the phone records only added fuel to the fire. Instead of clarifying the timeline, they created shadows where answers should have been. Every inconsistency left the room for speculation, and every unanswered question gave Amaral and his supporters more ground to claim there was a deeper truth being hidden. Beyond phone records and witness statements, another detail emerged from the Ocean Club resort itself: the children's daily sign-in sheets at the kids' club. These logs, simple registers where parents wrote their signatures when dropping off and collecting their children, should have been routine. Yet in the case of Madeleine McCann, they contained small but unsettling anomalies. From April 29th to May 3rd, the McCanns followed a fairly predictable schedule. Madeleine attended the lobster group for older children, while her younger siblings were placed in the jellyfish group. Typically, they were dropped off around 9 a.m. and picked up at 12:30 p.m., before returning again in the afternoon until about 5:30 p.m. Over 5 consecutive days, this pattern rarely changed. But when investigators examined the registers for May 1st and May 2nd, discrepancies stood out. On May 1st, Gerry McCann signed Madeleine into the afternoon session at 2:30 p.m., yet there was no corresponding signature to show that she had been signed out later that day. Instead, the line was left blank. It might have been an innocent oversight, a missed signature in the chaos of collecting children. But in hindsight, it felt like another missing piece in an already confusing puzzle. The following day, May 2nd, raised even more questions. That morning, Gerry again signed Madeleine in, but when she was picked up at 12:30 p.m., it was not by Gerry or Kate. Instead, the signature belonged to Katrina Baker, the nanny responsible for the lobster group. While she had occasionally signed out other children, it was unusual for her to do so in place of parents. Later that same afternoon, another irregularity appeared. At 2:45 p.m., Kate signed Madeleine back into the club. At 5:30 p.m., she signed her out. But this time, instead of writing Kate McCann, as she had done consistently before, she used her maiden name, Kate Healy. Across 5 days, Kate signed her children in and out 20 times. Only once did she use her maiden name, and it happened to be on the very day after Pamela Fenn claimed to have heard a child crying for more than an hour. For Amaral, such details were not mere coincidences. To him, they suggested confusion, concealment, or perhaps something more deliberate. To the McCanns, they were likely nothing more than the natural inconsistencies of busy parents on holiday. Yet, in a case built on fragments and doubts, even the smallest deviations took on an outsized weight. By the summer of 2008, Gonçalo Amaral had already been removed from the official investigation. But just days after Portuguese authorities shelved the case, he released The Truth of the Lie, his own account of the first 6 months, and his controversial theory that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A. His book, and later the documentary inspired by it, did more than provoke anger. It drew a clear battle line between two worlds, one in which Madeleine was still alive and waiting to be found, and another in which her disappearance was the result of a cover-up. The McCanns fought back fiercely. They called the book an injustice, not only against them, but against their daughter, arguing that it damaged the search by convincing the public she was already dead. For a time, the courts agreed. Amaral's book was banned, and he was ordered to pay damages. But the higher courts later overturned that decision, declaring his right to free expression. For Kate and Gerry, the outcome was devastating. For Amaral, it was vindication. Beyond the legal battle, the case had consumed extraordinary resources. More than £11 million of UK taxpayer money had been poured into Scotland Yard's special operation to find Madeleine. Countless private investigators had been hired. And yet, after years of searching, the fundamental questions remained unanswered. What happened in those crucial hours of May 3, 2007? Why did the phone records not match? Why did the kids' club registers contain strange anomalies? Why did so many witness statements conflict? The dominant narrative in British media painted the McCanns as victims of a cruel twist of fate, parents who made a tragic mistake but never stopped fighting for their daughter. In Portugal, however, skepticism lingered. Amaral's claims, though rejected by many as speculation, resonated with those who saw too many loose ends left unexplained. What makes this case endure is not just the disappearance of a child, but the collision of perception and truth. The story has been told and retold across books, documentaries, and courtrooms. Each version sheds light from a different angle, yet none have revealed the whole picture. More than a decade later, Madeleine's face still appears on posters and websites, a haunting reminder of innocence lost and of a mystery unresolved. Perhaps the most chilling aspect is that the truth may already be buried in plain sight, hidden in phone records, in witness statements, or in memories that have faded with time. Whether Madeleine is alive or not, whether Amaral was right or wrong, the question remains the same. What really happened in Praia da Luz? Until that answer is known, the case of Madeleine McCann will remain one of the most unsettling enigmas of our time.